Welcome back to Approaching Infinity, the show refocused on all things finance, innovation, and technology. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Warren Ross. He's a partner at JLC Income Fund, where he helps investors generate passive income by turning uncollected judgment into profitable assets. He's also a deal maker at the Jetson Capital events, where he fosters connections and deal flow between investors and emerging opportunities. Finally, he's a pioneer in alternative investment strategies, leveraging his proprietary asset finder system to uncover hidden value. Mr. Ross, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate being here, and it's good to be able to visit.
Thank you for joining us. I think we've met previously in shared networking groups, and your background was just astounding, and what you do is quite unique. And I think it would add quite a bit of value to our audience, kind of understanding what uncollected judgments are, how the fund works, and kind of how you've grown and scaled this.
I look forward to sharing that. It's a world that I didn't even know existed, and when I first heard about it, I thought was kind of crazy. It didn't seem to me that this would be something that would have any value for an investor, let alone anybody else that would have to deal with this type of debt.
Excellent. And then on that note, well, let's transition straight into it. Let's start off with the audience, right? What is an uncollected judgment? Just a brief intro to that.
One of the things that everybody has heard about is there's a lot of lawsuits. There's lawsuits everywhere. As soon as somebody gets upset, then they call their lawyer and I'm going to sue you. And then it goes into some kind of legal process. And that legal process is our civil justice system. So what happens is one person sues another person and then get to the place that they go back and forth. There's various court hearings that happen. But you think that the whole court case, when it finally comes to its conclusion, will mean that somebody's going to get paid and somebody else is going to have to pay. That's the presumption that you have in a court case. But guess what happens is the judge makes his decision. And this is all normal, ordinary cases, not necessarily the ones that are in the billions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And most of these cases are cases that couldn't be resolved in any kind of dispute resolution attempt, either out of court or arbitration or any of those kind of things. A lot of times there are people where the defendant who becomes a judgment debtor actually just ignores it altogether and just says, "Nah, I'm not even going to worry about it." That actually doesn't make the judge very happy. So you get what's called a default judgment in that case. But what the end result of this whole lawsuit process, all of this litigious society that we have, is a judgment where a judge makes a decision and says, this party owes this party this much money. Often the plaintiff becomes a judgment creditor and the defendant becomes the judgment debtor at that point. The judge may say, okay, this defendant did wrong, and what he needs to do is pay this creditor $250,000, just to pick a number out of the sky, because of what happened in that situation. Every single case is unique. Every single case is different. But now you have a situation where a judge has said, you owe this person money. And if you've gone through the 3-year, 5-year process, or even 6-month process, depending on that particular jurisdiction and that particular situation, you would think, okay, I won. Now I'm going to get paid, right?
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Wrong. And that's where the problem lies, is right there. Right now in our country, especially in that category of, the less than a few $1,000,000, those categories all the way down to thousands of dollars, those judgments never get paid. 80% of them statistically are never collected. And that is a really big problem if you're the one that got stolen from. Because these lawsuits are created because of a serious problem. Somebody lied, cheated, stole, hurt someone. There's financial damage that was created. You think, I'll get paid back for what happened to me. And when you're not, it's very unfortunate. It makes you really kind of doubt the legal system because it feels like there really wasn't justice. Even though you spent all this money on lawyers and the judge agreed with you, you still didn't get the money back that was stolen from you. And that becomes really hard on the people that were plaintiffs and become judgment creditors and go through that whole process. And they go, you know what? I got the short end of the stick, and I guess there's nothing I can do about it. And that's where we come in.
That's astounding. 80% of judgments go uncollected. I don't know how big the market is or how many judgments are handed down annually, but I'm assuming that's a massive chunk of change that more or less just goes unaccounted for.
There are over 3,000 counties in the United States, and each of those counties have a civil justice court system. And each of those counties have people that are suing each other, and the courts are already backed up depending on the jurisdiction, how many people live in that county. It can take months and months to get a court date. All of those are cases that eventually, if they're not settled out of court, become a judgment. And those judgments are the ones that we're talking about that people choose not to pay, that should pay them.
No, I mean, I think you perfectly answered the why. So I understand uncollected or a judgment, right, to essentially be an IOU.
Yeah,
And at the end of the
it's a
day,
debt. In the
yeah,
end, it's a court-approved debt. So if you had a judgment against me, then I would be the debtor and you would be the creditor, which means the court says, I owe you this amount of money. But this court really doesn't have any way for you to collect that without you going into the next stage, which is the execution of that judgment. You actually have to enforce that judgment. Now, the court does have a lot of tools that lawyers can use to help enforce a judgment, but there's one little caveat. Everybody who is a judgment debtor claims poverty, claims that they can't pay, I'm sorry, I'd pay if I could, but I just can't, so I'm sorry. And then we have this phrase in our world that can't get blood out of a turnip, and that's where everybody throws their hands up and says, I guess this is just a bad situation.
yeah,
And that's why a lot of them get uncollected, and that's legitimate in certain cases. Certain cases, it's just really a bad situation on both sides. A lot of emotions ran high on both sides, and there really is nothing to satisfy the judgment with.
understood. And then I think that, sorry.
But there's so many of them, Justin, that it's really a scam artist that has hidden the assets that they've stolen. And they're claiming that they can't pay when they've just moved the money into a different place and hidden.
I see now, like the why behind it. In cases like that, where it is like a scam artist more or less moving money around, where someone who is truly owed a debt, right, and they're more or less being run around in circles where I've been awarded this judgment, so to say, but I haven't been awarded anything, and I'm accruing all these fees or whatnot. And I guess that's the why behind it. Hey, we need to go and solve the problem of uncollected judgments, because if there is a case where there is someone who truly does deserve this debt or judgment, we want to be able to go after that. And then I do want to transition into the fund. It's like, how did you come up with the idea for JLC Income Fund to more or less be structured to go after these uncollected judgments that help out the system, help out the individuals, kind of make everything work a bit more clean?
Well, first of all, let's back up into our business, Acorn Funding Group, which was started in 2019 with my two partners, Jay and Rod, and then in 2022 I joined in helping both in the acquiring of judgments and in the raising of capital. So what happened is you have Rod, who has 40 years of experience investigating financial situations that have gone wrong. So a financial investigator goes and he follows the money. Let's figure out what happened to the money. He's also a certified fraud examiner, which means that there's a whole process for CFEs to go through to be able to identify fraud in financial matters. But it really boils down to following the money and finding where it's at. And not everybody can find the money. It takes a special type of private investigator to be able to find the money. And then when one of my dad's longtime partners, Jay, who I've known for the last, 30 years, met Rod, my dad and Jay met Rod in Cincinnati, they were like, now, why isn't that this problem is being solved? Why aren't more people taking these judgments that exist that nobody can collect? Why? It boils down to there's a missing gap between the financial investigation world and the legal world, and those worlds haven't been communicating very well together. And so we had to create a whole new business that took the legal world and this financial investigation world and put them together, because the only reason that these judgments are valuable is if you know where the money's at. So it's almost like, if you were to use a real estate example, if you bought a house, a property that was completely run down, that has a huge discount and it's a lot cheaper, because nobody wants a house that's just all run down and you can't even live in because it's unlivable. But if you have a real estate investor come in, buy that house, get all the people involved to rehab that house until it becomes somewhere where people want to live, now the house is valuable and there's profit in that process. So with judgments, it's the same thing. A judgment is completely worthless until you know where the assets are that you can collect. Acorn Funding Group is a business that was started to buy uncollected judgments, and then which allows us to give something to the judgment creditor who would otherwise get nothing. But then the judgment creditor also has some hope that there's these experts that can actually go and create some justice for the situation that they're in. And if you can let go of the bitterness that you have in a very ugly lawsuit situation where you were taken advantage of, and you can get maybe a little bit to cover some of your immediate costs right now, but you can know that there's this bulldog that's out there that's going to go get that guy that stole your money. There's something that you can actually just move on with your life when you have that. So that was the business. We started buying these judgments and collecting them. And as we did that, we realized that there are so many more judgments out there that legitimately have hidden assets than we thought there. And so we had to scale our business. The only way to do that is going to be to have investors to help buy these judgments and pay for the litigation process of enforcing those judgments. So the JLC Income Fund has been established as a way for investors to get involved passively, so that you can put your money in a place where when you buy a judgment, you have somebody that can actually enforce a judgment, and then all you have to do is watch that process as it happens, and passively you're going to have double, triple, quadruple what your investment was over the next 3 to 5 years as that process goes through. And there's a lot of security in the fact that this is now a whole big pool of judgments, because not all judgments can be collected, and not every pre-investigation, pre-vetting turns out to be entirely accurate. Sometimes you get into a case and you find out things are not quite what they seemed like at the beginning.
That's incredible. Thank you for walking me through the entire process of how more or less it all works out. So just to confirm my understanding too, the forensic analysis is, for lack of better words, like forensic analysis, figuring out if the judgment can be collected is like step one, where it's like, hey, we found a case, we found some uncollected judgment. Do we know where the money is? Is this a valid case? And then how long does it more or less take, or does it vary depending on the case to, all right, do that forensic analysis. These are our, so to say, uncollected judgments, and then get the judgment payout back to the, I guess, end customer.
It takes a different amount of time in each case, unfortunately. We can look at it and say this is kind of typical based off the experience that we've had over the years, but each case can be different. So if there are people listening that have judgments that, because there's always, every time I talk, there's somebody who it's like, well, I do actually have one of those judgments that nobody's been able to collect. Then the first step is we look at that judgment, and it has nothing to do with the case itself or the judgment creditor. It has everything to do with the current status of the judgment debtor and their situation. And that can be different if the judgment debtor includes a company that may or may not exist anymore, or if the judgment debtor is a person that has personal liability in this situation. And then also, what happened to the money? What was the story? What was the situation? So what happens is we start with a pre-vetting process at that point, because we have to determine whether or not this judgment has any chance of collectability. So if I'm going to take the money that an investor has invested in either Acorn Funding Group directly or in the JLC Income Fund, I need to make sure that we have a reasonable chance to collect, and flip that 80% of judgments not being collected on its head so that we can collect at least 80% of the judgments that we buy. And that has been our success rate so far.
That's It's incredible. Incredibly, like before this, I've never heard of anything like this. And this is just a whole new.
Either had I, Justin, when I first heard about this from my dad and Jay, I'm like, this judgments are worthless. This is because I've grown up for generations in real estate investing, and you end up with small claims type judgments from tenants all the time as part of the process of eviction when you have a bad situation in a rental property. And so most of those judgments really are worthless because if the judgment debtor doesn't have anything, it becomes more costly to collect than you can actually collect. And so that does happen a lot of times. But then I had this idea that all judgments were worthless because nobody pays them and nobody can pay them because you can't get blood out of a turnip. And that's true unless the turnip is actually a tomato and it's hiding all of its juice somewhere else. So that's where the financial investigation comes in. And our money magician, Rod, actually that financial investigation that he does is what changes a judgment from worthless into something that we can actually pay for. And then once we pay for it, there's the legal process that we go through, which can include all kinds of things. It could include going and getting money that they've hidden. It could go getting property that they've hidden. We've had situations where people inappropriately move a piece of property from their name to somebody else's name. We had a case where a guy put it in his brother's name, which once we showed that it was illegitimate, that was one thing. But we also discovered his brother had actually died 5 years prior. So he was living under his brother's name who had passed away just to hide all these assets that he had inappropriately kept
That's a
and
few
should have
crimes in
paid.
itself.
There are a number of different crimes that got involved in that case. But once you were able to discover that story, discover what happened, we were able to get everything to the place that we were able to collect that judgment. So, it's very typical that we would end up paying, $10,000 for something like that would end up in $100,000 being recovered. So that's a pretty typical type of
Very interesting too. I like
scenario.
the analogy, turning the turnip might be a tomato. And then on that note too, you mentioned a few previous cases and lessons learned. We can go probably one of two ways here. Why don't we start with, some key lessons learned more or less along the way? How you mentioned like, all right, originally we thought like judgments didn't really have much value, but all of a sudden, hey, there's a lot more to them. You got to find the tomatoes.
Exactly.
Do you have any other key lessons learned you'd like to share throughout your journey?
A really important thing is on the judgment acquisition side in regard to investing. You could hear this story and say, oh, judgments are valuable. I need to go buy a bunch of judgments. Unfortunately, that would be a good way to lose money because without a pre-vetting process where you can identify that there's a way to actually enforce the judgments, because the reason why these judgments aren't enforced is because the judgment debtor is not volunteering to pay. So we have to put the judgment debtor in a place where he has no choice except to pay. And this can be a number of different ways. If we actually take control of property that they want to keep, like the one with the guy who put it in his brother's name that had passed away, it causes a situation where once they find out that they can't not pay, then they figure out a way to pay because they're going to lose the property otherwise. And so there are different situations that once it becomes mandatory for whatever reason for them to pay, all of a sudden the judgment will get enforced because they don't have a choice not to. If they had the choice not to pay, then they would continue not to pay. Rod a lot of times like to call them strategic non-payers because why pay a bill if you don't really have to? If there's nobody ever going to force you to pay it, there are people that have the attitude that they're not going to pay their debts unless they have to. And so in those situations, we create the legal process that forces them to have to. And that's how you actually enforce a judgment against. I actually like to call them white collar bad guys, Justin, because from my perspective, they are inappropriately not paying a legitimate debt and often they are also, liars, cheaters, scam artists that have chosen to take advantage of a situation knowing that the probability is they'll never have to pay. So yeah, sue me. So what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad but true fact. If the debt isn't going to be enforced, there are some white collar bad guys who are going to take advantage of the system. 80% of judgments go uncollected. It's like, why? Yeah, I see. This is definitely an
And it all
extremely neat.
boils down to finding the money. It's like the story of that case in Detroit, where I'll change the names a little bit to protect the people in the case. But CJ, he called me and he's like, I've got this situation. I hired the best attorney in all of Detroit. He got me a really good judgment. And now he tells me he has no idea how to collect. And the probability is high that the debtor's going to declare bankruptcy and I'm not going to get anything anyway. And I really need a little bit of money. It was a damage that was caused in a car accident with a small under the table type trucking company that just operated with cash and didn't have any insurance on any of their vehicles. So insurance wouldn't pay for the damages. And actually, a lot of lawsuits are paid by insurance companies, by the way. And if an insurance company's not involved, that's when the judgment doesn't get paid. Of course, a lot of those situations are settled out of court before it ever becomes a judgment as well. But in this case, when we looked at it, we looked at the situation that the debtor had. There was some real estate involved. It looked like there might be a legitimate business happening with this particular debtor. And the debtor just essentially ignored and was like, nah, I don't have to pay. I'm not going to worry about it. We bought that judgment. It was almost $200,000 judgment. We bought it for about $8,800, if my memory serves correct. And as we went through the process, we actually were able to find a whole bank account that this particular company had just been putting money in hidden. It was not an obvious place. And then the judgment debtor started claiming that they weren't the person and that there was a name confusion. And then they had their cousin involved and another person involved. And what ended up happening, Justin, is they upset the judge to the place that the judge said, you just give that whole bank account to them because it really is legitimate that you are the person and you're really trying to hide this money from this debt that really is a legitimate judgment that was created. And so in that process, we went from the investment in the judgment, which really helped CJ to be able to do some things he needed to do financially and walk away from it. And he got something instead of nothing, which really helped him. But it also created a situation where for the investor that had invested in buying this judgment, the $80,000 bank account, and all of a sudden we're 10 times over what we paid for it. We did have some legal expenses involved as well. And we still have, a bunch of equity in a property that we are pursuing a process that would essentially be like foreclosure that will make it so that we can get a bunch of that equity as well if he wants to keep his house. And so he probably will. He's still resisting that. But that's an example of the type of thing that we invest in. Put $8,100 in, get $80,000 back with the legal expenses involved in that, and we still have more profitability. And we're teaching a guy a lesson that really should be operating in a much more legitimate way than trying to illegitimately just take advantage of people that he had promised to help. And obviously, if he had been operating his trucking company with insurance, it would have never even gone to court because it would have just been taken care of.
Wow. No, that's really, I'm so glad you were able to unravel that web and find the spider, so to say.
Exactly.
That seemed like it was quite the journey.
And the magician is Rod. He was able to go through the process, find out where this money was hidden, and then get the court to just hand it to us. So it wasn't because he wrote us an $80,000 check. It was because the court said that $80,000 checking account belongs to the debtor, and the court transferred the money to us. So that's how it works sometimes.
That's an incredible insight too, and thank you for sharing the journey and more or less how this uncollected judgments works more or less.
Yeah, and we literally have hundreds of those stories, and they're all unique and all different. It's really amazing as I've watched this happen over the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, that's incredible. I do want to pivot too and just kind of go over. Yeah, we went over Acorns funding and JLC income. What about your journey yourself? Going just a quick hero's journey, how you got off on this vein, to where you are now, and how did this all come about?
It really kind of interesting. It all came about by learning as a young man that one of the most important things that I could do would be to help others. And actually, I also discovered a little bit about myself, that I was able to help others more by talking and explaining things, sales. than I was with, some kind of working with my hands. Like I tried to fix some things on my car, and I thought that would be something I could do. My dad and others had done it real well. And I grew up in the construction business because of the real estate that we were involved in there. And I've done a lot of construction work, and I realized that a lot of that stuff was not things that I was really good at. My brother, on the other hand, was really good at those things. He enjoyed those things. But for me, I would rather get to know somebody and have a conversation than I would to go and try to fix a car or build a house. And so as I discovered that process of myself, I got involved in various different situations where I was a salesperson. And so over the last 35 years, I have been in some version of a sales process, and I've discovered more and more about how to help others. And as I do that, that continually has increased the value that I'm able to bring both to the marketplace and to my customers and clients. And so as I've done that in all different kinds of industries, I've been in manufacturing. Obviously, real estate is something we've done a lot of. Also, I spent 10 years, a decade in the automotive industry. And as I went through all of those different experiences and learned all of these different things, I became the best at what I do. And becoming the best in a sales or marketing environment, there's always somebody that needs money. And there's always somebody who has a really good product or solution that just needs to get to the marketplace. And if you are able to articulate and explain to the market and to the customers why this is going to be a really big benefit for them, you can create value for everybody involved. And the customer chiefly is the biggest winner in all of these transactions, because when you do things right, it's just like selling $100 bills for $20. If you can buy a $100 bill for $20, you better be doing that every chance you get.
That's incredible too. So you honed your craft more or less through various roles, and you more or less became the best at what you do through a variety of like sales.
Yeah, that's basically what happened that got me to here. And then my dad and his partner, when they started this business, were like, we want the best person that has a sales type of skill set to be able to help us in this business. And I was the one that came to mind to be in that role. So in order to help get investors, we call that capital raising. Also to help get judgments, which is talking to the judgment creditors and explaining to them the situation and how, unfortunately, I can't pay as much as I would like for their judgment, but also I could be able to help them potentially. And so the judgment acquisition side of our business and the capital raising side of our business became the role that I was asked to fulfill. And that's been a very fun journey as I've got from where I started, just being a paper boy, all the way up to where now I can ask for $1 million check and expect to receive it.
Yeah, that's an incredible journey story, and it's still ongoing.
It is. Yes, exactly. There are ongoing opportunities. And again, that's the same reason why I'm involved with Jetson Capital, is in that same role of just help. Every business can't operate without cash flow. And so the people that are involved in bringing money into that business become very valuable. And obviously, every business can't actually operate without having cash coming in so that they can provide the service that they're good at, that their business is all built around.
Do you want to touch on that for a moment too? Like your work involved with Jetson Capital?
Jetson Capital is a great idea. I get to work with Jordan Hutchinson in that business. And what that is a networking group where we solve another problem. One of the problems that exists in networking, especially in the capital raising type of world, is you are told that, hey, this room is going to be really good. You're going to meet a lot of people that can help you. And you discover that when you show up, the room is full of people just like yourself who also need money for the projects that they're doing. Any type of fund that you've ever heard of, from a hedge fund to a private equity fund, a venture capital fund, all of those funds require capital in order for the fund to work. The investors are the limited partners in those situations, are what make the whole financial process of investing and returns possible. But when you show up and you're trying to find people that could invest in this case, judgments, and you find out that everybody also has their own project and they are looking for money, that doesn't really help you. And so Jordan had grown up in and been with his dad's family office, had grown up around people that were wealthy. And he looked at it and he said, if we actually had a room that had almost all people that could allocate money, and with a few people that had really good projects that could be invested in, then it really would be a valuable room for all the people involved. Because when good people meet other good people, good things happen, especially if you have wealth involved. Now, wealth is not just money, and that's a whole nother discussion. But this idea that Jordan Hutchinson had is an idea that really captured my interest. And so we said, what we'll do is we'll create a private hangar meeting. So everybody goes to a private hangar with private jets, and then we're going to have some supercars so that we have the right environment for the people that have a lot of money. Because that's what it does, is it starts to eliminate the people that aren't comfortable around that situation. So we're going to have people that are millionaires and billionaires there. And then we're going to be able to have some people that need to raise capital as well. And we're going to create the very best networking room possible. So we became an organization that facilitates relationships through private jet hangars and private jets. And we've been doing this all around the country for a couple of years now and continue to grow exponentially. So anybody that's looking to raise capital, this is an opportunity. But even more so, if you have some wealth and you're a high net worth individual or a family office, this is the place where you can actually network with people in other industries. Let's say your family office is dealing with crypto. Maybe there's another family office that's been focusing on real estate, and you start meeting each other and you can start doing things cooperatively that end up being good people meeting good people, making good things happen and solving problems in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's incredible. And, for our audience too, that is probably one of the most key problems for emerging managers too, finding initial capital, more or less get your idea off the ground, or just networking, getting a nice, I don't even want to say networking, just having a good conversation. Someone in a friendly-esque environment, whether it's Jets and Capitals. I don't know if you guys expand yachts and capital or how you plan on doing it.
We might. We've done an F1 event. We've done some events at Mar-a-Lago as well. And so there's always things that we will likely expand to, but it's really a situation where we're trying to create the best room possible to create the best relationships, because relationships and reputation is what creates results.
I want to thank you again for joining us on the show. We do like to do this thing where, inspired by Mr. Ryan Miller, where at the end of the show, if you had any, lessons learned, key words of wisdom, or anything really for our audience, regardless of topic, do you have anything to share?
I do. And the thing that I would say is most important over all of the years that I have learned is your relationships matter. All of the relationships that you build, pay attention to other people. Be interested in what they're doing. Don't make the whole conversation about you. The more interested you are and the more you're able to give, it just works out that you end up receiving a lot as well. But if you really have a heart that you are being kind to others, you're being interested in others, being friendly with others, you're going to make the world a better place. And you'll also end up going along in a way that you'll discover that you'll be the biggest beneficiary. You can't outgive when you really have an attitude of gratitude. And all of these platitudes that we use and all these words, that make them mean something to you. So focus on the relationships around you and look for other relationships that will also build you up, because that is going to help bring you on a trajectory to where you want to be or better.
Excellent. Well said, and completely agree. Relationships, one of the most important things. And I think, when I'm gone, the relationships I leave will be the one lasting thing, hopefully, for my legacy.
Exactly.
And everything's like,
relationships are more meaningful than things. So be interested in the people that are involved in your business. Be interested in the people that you're related to and you have challenges with. You work on those relationships. But really, remember that all of this is, you can't change other people, but you really can help them if you're interested in what they're doing. So be interested and focus on the relationship. And then, be generous, because when you give, it does come around.
Well said. Mr. Ross, we're wrapping up now, but if our audience wanted to reach out to you or learn more about the work you do, where should they go and what should they do?
A couple of ways you can do that. LinkedIn is a good way to reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you look for Warren Ross, and sometimes you have to put Idaho in there because I'm not the only Warren Ross out there, but that will find me. The other way is send me an email. There are 2 different emails. If you have a judgment and you would like some investigation to find out if we could help you with that judgment, then send an email to wr@acornfundinggroup.com. And then if you're actually looking at investing, then it would be better to send me an email at warren@jlcincomefund.com. So you are at acornfundinggroup.com or warren@jlcincomefund.com. Those 2 emails would be the fastest way to get a hold of me, or reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Mr. Ross, thank you again for joining us on the show, providing your insights, sharing your story, and overall just adding value to our listeners. I want to thank the audience again for joining us on another episode of Approaching Infinity, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you. Take care now.
Thank you, Justin.